Hey guys, this is a collab discussion that I had with fellow Jujutsu Kaisen creator TheFakeWeeb, where we went over what our favorite fights in the series are. So let's get into it.
So yeah, my favorite fight in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, it's Eugene Todo versus Mahito at the end of Shibuya. Personally, I think this fight is just perfect. It has everything I'd want in a badass fight. The build-up itself had so much emotional impact thanks to what happened with Nanami and Nobara earlier. Then we saw like Yuji rage as well as his like mental health being kind of broken. And then, after that was Todo saving him and relifting his spirits up. All in all, like that just entire build-up sequence alone to me is one of like the best moments in Jujutsu Kaisen. And then when they actually started fighting, we got to see just a cluster F of action. Like not plain action, but like very good choreography. I love the utilization of Todo's Boogie Woogie. Him and Yuji just constantly switching places to attack Mahito. That was so satisfying. Obviously, we saw like a ton of black flashes too, and yeah, our characters were literally growing and developing as this fight went on. It was even mentioned in like a double spread that like these three characters had unleashed 120% of their potential, which, that moment in itself was really hype. Overall, I think this was just a very huge, important fight. There was big stakes, and I love the conclusion. I love seeing Yuji's resolve to constantly hunt down curses no matter what, accepting that role of becoming a cog in a machine, and it like the imagery of him as a wolf hunting down Mahito as a rabbit. That was really cool. Therefore, it's like easily my favorite fight in the entire series.
Yeah, you know what? Now that you mention it, I forgot that coming into this fight was right after Nanami and Nobara, quote unquote, died. Well, Nanami for sure. Nobara still remains to be seen. But I forgot that had happened right before this, because that does bring so much more into this and leads into, the ultimate conclusion that you were just talking about, how Yuji becomes easily the most unhinged he's ever been in the series by the end of it. And yeah, you were at 100% on the 120%, because I was just looking at that panel and that's exactly what it says.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. I'm also surprised kind of by how powerful Todo was in this fight, because he's strong in relation to the other students, of course, but Mahito is kind of like particularly powerful for pretty much anyone that's not Gojo, at least in Shibuya at this point. And yeah, I just like how he just immediately is able to use like the simple domain, which it says he inherited from Tsukumo, which we still haven't got much insight into their full relationship, I guess, yet, but that's besides the point. But yeah, I really like that, because it's like, before this, you just assume like, oh, once the more powerful person activates the domain, it's pretty much over. But no, Todo's prepared, and of course Yuji has Sukuna, so it was never really going to work out in the first place. But another thing, we were talking about this before we started recording, but how like the series changes after Shibuya is over. Black flashes, so much used in this fight, and it's like we never really see it again after this.
Exactly.
Like, I forgot how long it was. It lasts like 4 or 5 chapters, maybe even more than that.
I actually believe it's the longest fight in the series, because if I remember, like the fight probably ended a couple chapters before Shibuya, so maybe like 133 or 134. And I remember like the chapter where Nanami died, it was like 123 or 122. I'm probably off, but it's probably the longest, like if we're counting the start when Nanami died to when Yuji was like hunting down Mahito. I believe that was like 9 or 10 chapters, which is kind of insane.
Do you think Yuji being able to fight against like, what would you call Mahito's true form? I guess that's what you could say, once he like fully,
like when he found the true essence of his soul. Yeah.
Do you think him being able to fight against him so competitively is warranted at this point? Because like when I first read this, I was like, well, how the hell are they going to overcome this at this point? Because at least in my mind, Yuji wasn't nearly strong enough to not just defeat Mahito by himself, but let alone fight this version of him, which seems to multiply his power for sure. but then he's just, black flashing him in like the liver or the kidney, it looks like, and that's pretty much the beginning of the end at that point.
I don't know. I feel like, yeah, it felt kind of okay. Like, how was he able to do that? But I also think, I believe Todo kind of helped him in that fight as well. Like, he faked clap, which like tricked Mahito and allowed Yuji to like land a powerful blow. I don't know. I feel like the black flashes in the series, they're so strong where it could do that much damage effect to, Mahito in that form. Yeah, I do get what you're saying. It was kind of like a little bit odd.
But, actually, I don't really mind it that much. And yeah, you're absolutely right about the fake out. He slams. Did that happen? Yeah, he slams like his cut off hand into his right hand. And he's like, sorry, my boogie woogie curse technique is already dead. And that does throw Mahito off, and that's when he gets caught. But I appreciate more so that it kind of goes down this way, because the Black Flash, it has been established that it's like this. It's essentially like a critical hit. So yeah. I like that more than just Yuji got an ass pull power up or something happened. That it was because I'm coming off of reading Bleach. And that happens like so much in the series. So I mean, I like this better, and also it leads to the really cool sequence where like, we get the wolf and the rabbit, and it's so satisfying because you really hate Mahito up until this point in the series, and he's like so smug. I mean, you like love to hate him. I'll say, I don't think like you just want him to go away, like you hate him that much, but to see him finally get his comeuppance in like a satisfying way when he just becomes like super cowardly, and he's ultimately just betrayed by Kenjaku, and then you just find out it's not even like necessarily a betrayal, because this was ultimately his goal and plan for him anyway. That's one of the reasons why he Kenjaku recruited him. It's because he needed that for his plan. Like, he can't do his ultimate goal without transfiguration.
I will say, like, obviously, like, he needed his idol transfiguration for the Culling Games, but it was kind of like, I don't know, I was kind of like, come on, like, Yuji, like, couldn't get to finish Mahito at the end. Like, it was, at the end of the day, it was kind of Kenjaku. But, like, overall, like, I don't think I mind that too much. It was really good.
So, my favorite fight in the series is Yuji versus Higuruma. And when I first read this, I was really excited by it and I enjoyed it, but I didn't really come to appreciate it even more as much as I do now until I like read it again the second time around, and then the third time, and then the fourth time. It's like, wow, this is just, it's so much fun and it's so different. It's probably like the most different and unique fight in the entire series. And I just really like Deadly Sentencing. I just think the whole way that it works, what it forces you to do and what it forces you not to do, I think is super compelling, because like once he activates it, like you can't fight, essentially. It says that like you can't use violence, neither can. So like he's bound by it, of course, Yuji's bound by it, and they literally like have to go through like this quick court sentencing or just this trial. And the whole time, and another thing that I really like about this is that it's like babyface versus babyface. I mean, like good guy versus good guy. Like Higuruma is not like a villain or a bad guy in the slightest. And if anything, you also get the perspective of him. Like you get to hear his inner monologue during this fight. Like he feels, threatened by Yuji, intimidated by him. Like he realizes that he's a beast. And you kind of like have this aspect where it's almost like Yuji is the antagonist in this fight at times. And we don't typically get that, obviously. Yeah, so it's different in that sense. But just the whole fact that like it just stops. It stops sorcery fight. And you have to just do the trial. And I just thought that was so interesting. And there's actually kind of like, it's like two parts, of course. Like they first do the one trial about Yuji gambling, and Yuji winds up being found guilty kind of by his own fault, because he actually lists out a couple options at the beginning. He's like, should I lie? Should I tell the truth? Should I just say anything? And he ultimately just decides on lying. And of course it doesn't work out for him, because Judge Man has the exact evidence that shows that he went to the cash out place. And then you're like, okay, so what happens? And then it turns out that he's going to get confiscation. Like, that's the penalty. And he just, normally confiscation would take away your curse technique, but since Yuji doesn't have one, it compensated, like it on the fly altered its ability for him as to where he can no longer like control his cursed energy. But of course, in Yuji's case, he's a freaking beast, implied to have been altered to become the host for Sukuna by Kenjaku, and that's a story for another time. But then we see Higuruma take him on with like his gavel, which I'm still not really sure what it is. Like, I assume it's just a part of his curse technique, or it's actually what his curse technique actually is, aside from like the domain. Because the way that it like alters, it can change size and shape and variability and what it's able to do and whatnot. And that's another really cool aspect of the fight too. Just how he uses the gavel and Yuji defending against him and not being able to use his curse energy, just relying straight on like his brute force. And Yuji eventually figures out, like, hey, I could just do a retrial here, because he just figures like that's how it's got to work, and it does. And then we get like the big iconic moment from this fight. I think this is the one that stands out the most, because at least that's the one that I see people talking about the most on social media. It's where Judge Man then accuses Yuji of mass murder in Shibuya on Halloween. And just immediately he's like, yeah, I did that. I'm not going to lie. I won't deny it. And then Judge Man like freaks out. It's like, guilty, confiscation, death penalty. So, and that's like another raw moment from Yuji, because he has like this lifeless expression in his eyes when he says it, because obviously he didn't do it. We know that Sukuna did, but Yuji as a character has the guilt from doing it. Which is addressed later on by him saying that he just is weak and he wasn't strong enough to stop Sukuna from being able to do it, and he allowed himself to be used, for this mass murder. So he has like that deep guilt in him that part of him wanted to pay the price for. And it brings us to what ultimately happens here, and I think this is maybe one of the coolest abilities in the series, where the confiscation this time is the death penalty, and Higuruma's gavel becomes the executioner's sword. And the exposition on this thing is freaking crazy. It says, without exception, anyone cut by the executioner's sword will die. What do you think?
That's got to be like the strongest. I could be wrong, but I believe that's like the strongest curse tool we've seen in the series. Like, that's really insane.
That's what I'm saying. Because it goes out of, this is the Viz translation, so we have to accept this as official, I suppose. Unless there's like somebody out there who can break down nuanced Japanese and then give us the true meaning. But without exception, like specifically telling us, like, no matter what character you're thinking of, Gojo, Sukuna, Kenjaku, they're going to die if they get cut by this. It's so cool, I think. Yes, overpowered, but just the way that it is utilized. Like, you have to go through the trial, and then if your crimes are severe enough to get the death penalty, you're pretty much going to die. Of course, it's like it has the balance, because Higuruma himself has to wield it, and he has to be capable enough to cut you with it. But still, just the fact that he's holding just this unbeatable thing, I think it's just so cool. And that brings us to the ending of the fight, where Higuruma doesn't want to kill Yuji because he knows that it was Sukuna that did it. It's revealed that the evidence is like telepathically conveyed to Higuruma as well, not just Judge Man knows it. So he already knew that Yuji was innocent. Then we come to the point where I was talking about Yuji feels guilty for what happened because he's not strong enough, and that resonates with Higuruma just being a lawyer in the first place. And it also reminds him of that kid when we first got introduced to Higuruma, like the one that was found guilty when he pretty much knew that he was innocent. And Higuruma just winds up stop fighting. Like, he just releases the executioner's sword and allows himself to get hit by Yuji. And, you know, they have that back and forth, and Higuruma's like, you know what? You're a good kid. I'll give you my points. And I think that's also a pretty satisfying conclusion to this fight, because in my opinion, I'm pretty sure Higuruma could have killed Yuji here. I mean, Yuji was putting up a good fight. You know, he's throwing like the chairs and desks at him and trying to avoid getting hit as much as he could. But ultimately, Higuruma is skilled enough to, I think, just cut him once. And obviously that's all he needed. And it didn't come down to like some kind of talk no jutsu where, you know, he just convinces Higuruma to give up or whatever. It's just the way the narrative crafts itself leads to this good conclusion, because this is, you know, Higuruma, like I said at the beginning, he's a good guy. He didn't want to kill Yuji at all. He doesn't want to kill in general, but he's just kind of unhinged at this moment because the culling game has given him so much freedom. And he was already on like the edge of questioning the legal system in the first place. It's just such an interesting dynamic just in the fight, the fighting itself, the choreography, but the story that this one fight tells as well. And it's also made me such a big fan of Higuruma. Like, I can't wait till he comes back.
Honestly, like, now that you bring that fight up to me, I mean, I always knew that it was like easily the most narrative fight out of all the culling games, but wow, it is a really good fight. And I actually want to point out, I really like the fact that Yuji was able to lie about playing pachinko or enter that pachinko parlor, but not lie about the Sakun or the Shibuya massacre, even though that's more liable because he didn't do it. So to me, like, that's just insane. Like, that goes to show like Yuji's guilt. And like when Higuruma saw Yuji kind of like lying to himself or blaming himself for the events that he didn't do, I think it reminded Higuruma of what happened to Oe, which is like this character back in like the Higuruma flashback where, you know, he got declared guilty and it was wrong, and like that was the start of Higuruma getting mad and losing like faith in humanity and the justice legal system. So it was really cool to kind of like see that back again, then, you know, him just stopping the fight because he knows Yuji is a good kid and he didn't really do it. And yeah, I mean, like you said, it was the best narratively, and I honestly can't wait for him to come back. And I hope he comes back, because I know in the end he's like, nah, I'm leaving, I'm not gonna stick with you. But I'm pretty sure us fans can tell that, yeah, like probably most of the culling game characters are gonna come back in the end.
So yeah, that was pretty much it for this one, guys. Be sure to check out the TheFakeWeeb's channel. He also does reviews on Jujutsu Kaisen chapters every week, so give him a subscribe if you haven't already. And if you liked the video, please give it a like, and have a great day.